And this is a universal principle. In the Bible it is said, the first and great commandment is to love God with all your mind, all your words, with your whole heart, mind, and soul. And if one does that, then naturally we learn to love our neighbor as ourselves, because we see that eternal spark, that source of consciousness that is within us, that is a part of God, is the same in every living being. Wherever there's life, there is the presence of that sacred spiritual spark. So when we love God, when we know ourselves, we actually see every living being as our brothers and our sisters. We actually perceive the sacredness of life. In the 5th chapter of the Gita, there's a beautiful verse. Vidyavanaya sampane brahmanika vihastini sunichaiva swapakeja panditasamadarsana. Real wisdom is defined in this way: the ability to see every living being with equal vision. Not that we just see the equality on a social level, or to try to create, more social peace, because that could change. But to actually identify and love every living being by seeing wherever there's life, there is a sacred part of God. There is a deep and true relationship. When love of God awakens within the heart, the test of that is not what religion we follow and what rituals we perform or how loud we can speak on the campus green. The real test of love of God, which is universal, the essence, is how we are instruments of compassion to every living being, without prejudice, without judgment, to be an instrument of that compassion that is within us. That fulfillment that we are all looking for, from the cockroach to the Queen of England and everyone else in between. It's love. The most fundamental need for all living beings is to love and be loved. Nothing else can give satisfaction to the heart. And that love is our nature. It is within us. It is who we are. And it is our greatest potential. To access that love is the essential purpose of every great spiritual path. Why are we not experiencing it? Why are we so afraid of death when we're eternal? Why do we hate when our nature is to love? It's due to this avidya, or ignorance, the root cause of suffering and problems. We have forgotten who we are. The next question, why have we forgotten? Now we can speak from that subject from many different perspectives, but from a very practical level. It's because the mind is so full of dust. The mind is considered a mirror. We, the soul, are seeing life through the mind while we're living in this embodied form. Now, the purpose of the mind is to reflect who we really are. And actually be a medium the mind is a medium by which the grace and the love of our soul can manifest within the world for the welfare of all beings. But if the mirror is covered with layers and layers and layers of dust and dirt and debris, what do you see? The dust. And the dust in this sense is all of our attachments, all of our misconceptions, all of our aversions, all of our fears, all of our temptations, and essentially our ego, our ahankar. But if we cleanse the mirror, then we can actually see ourselves. The Bhagavad Gita tells that for one who learns to control and clean the mind is your very, very best friend. But for one who fails to do so, the mind is the greatest enemy. The Gita and the Bhagavad explains there's really no other enemies except our own mind. Booker T. Washington. He was a slave, emancipated slave. When he was about 9 years old, he was working hard labor. Prejudice, persecuted. But he was just so positive in his spirit. He came out to be a founder of an institution. He got scholarships and such tremendous impact he had in the world. There's one statement he made that really moved my heart. It's what we're talking about. He proclaimed, "I will not allow any man to belittle and degrade my soul by making me hate him." I'll repeat that. I will not allow any man to belittle my soul by making me hate him. He refused to hate, even though he was hated. His perception. He was seeing life from a different perspective. He was seeing life not as a reaction to what's happening outside of us. He was seeing life from a realization that he found within himself. Michelangelo, he was asked, "How do you carve these beautiful statues?" He said, "When I see a crude block of marble or stone," he said, "I see the finished product of the statue. From the very beginning, I see it right there. And then all I do is I just chip away those things that obscure it." Life is so much according to our perception, our vision. These are very practical, historical explanations of how people trained their mind. We've all heard the story about you can see the glass as being half empty or half full. You could complain that it's half empty, or you could rejoice that it's half full. It's the same thing. The reality is, in this world, we have a little bit of control over some things, but we really don't have much control over everything. I was recently talking to my father on the phone. He's 87 years old. I called him to wish him happy birthday on November 13th, just 3 days ago. He said, "I don't feel like I'm 87, but I'm 87. And he was talking, he wants to come to India in January. And he was saying how, if only I was younger, I would love to just come, so much. I love your people there so much. So old age is not within our control. We have to get old. Sometimes we have to get diseased. And sometimes people just don't treat us the way we want to be treated. And sometimes things just don't happen the way we want them to happen. There's some control we have, but ultimately we don't. The nature of the world is it's created in duality, success and failure, honor and dishonor, pleasure and pain, happiness and distress, health and disease. And these dualities are like two sides of the same coin. You just can't take one without the other. They're going to happen. But one thing we do have control over is how we're going to interpret it and how we're going to respond to it. Are we going to respond to hatred with love, or are we going to respond to hatred with hatred? Who was it? I think it was Nelson Mandela said that when you respond to hatred with hatred, what you do is you're drinking poison with the intent of killing the person you hate. Does that make sense? There's a Chinese proverb: if you want to get vengeance in someone, dig 2 graves. One for the person and one for you. Because you're killing your own inner substance, your own inner goodness, by polluting it with these things. So yoga, or real spirituality, teaches us the tools by which we actually learn how to control our mind on the basis of the real substance of who we are. There's a beautiful example in the Bhagavad Gita that the body is like a chariot and the 5 senses are like 5 horses. And the mind is like the reins, the ropes that are meant to control the horses, which determine the direction of the chariot. The intelligence is the chariot driver. And the Atma, or the eternal soul, the true self, the part of God, is the passenger. Now, if the intelligence is guiding the mind, which is guiding the senses and the body according to the will of the passenger, then we're going really in the right direction. But if the passenger is just at the whims of the uncontrolled senses and horses of the mind, then we're in a very, very difficult situation. So yoga is to harmonize the body, the mind, and the soul, so that they're all working for the same purpose. And this is the greatest need. Spirituality, religion, yoga is not about changing our faith. It's about changing our hearts. It's not about changing our occupation. It's about changing our motivations. It's about accessing the great wealth, the great treasure that is within us. But the mind is like a wild monkey. How many of you have been encountered by monkeys? Please raise your hand. Krishna, in the Gita, it explains, yato yato nishchalati manaschanchanamastheram. It means this mind is so unsteady and fickle and just roaming here and there and everywhere. I read a statistic that the mind has an average, for a human being, whoever you are, 60,000 separate thoughts every day.